I can't find a documented case of Chaparral burning underground. In fact, the internet says it doesn't. Chaparral is the name given to the drought-tolerant series of brush-like and bush-like species that inhabit the Mediterranean landscape of the world. And that is where the most fires occur. Yes, it turns out the ideal climate for humans is also the ideal climate for wildfires. A recent study that examined tree rings that were adjacent to Chaparral found that wildfires have always been in Southern California for all of recorded history. When there is a wildfire involving Chaparral, there's nothing left. It's called a crown fire. By many accounts, a large portion of Chaparral actually depends on fire to procreate, and yet is also fire resistant with its leaves. I'll definitely be exploring this topic more in the future. A 29-year-old man is being charged with a very serious crime. The entire basis of this crime is that fire he set, allegedly, burned underground for 7 days. The Department of Justice has arrested Jonathan Rinderknecht in Melbourne, Florida, where he now lives. He was living in the Palisades. So all of the coverage of this guy is basically centered on court documents, which include evidence from his phone, showing that he had asked ChatGPT, if you started a fire because of your cigarette, is it your fault? So he placed several calls to 911 from Skull Rock, but I think the LA Times said he was unable to get through. This guy was agitated, according to witnesses who had ridden in his Uber. It would be probably not as weird if we didn't have a holdover fire 1 week later that burned down the Palisades, that there was a fire that this guy started and then it smoldered underground. I can't find a documented case of Chaparral burning underground. Apparently, the LA Times said, via an unnamed source, that there was an ember in the original fire that was buried deep underground and that it reignited the fire. I reached out to an expert on this native habitat. The species are designed to perpetuate themselves after a fire, but it's complicated, so I will let you guys know when I hear back from him. But holdover fires, all the examples I see are from the 2020s, and they're mostly from Canada, where the oil fields are. Oddly enough, the oil exploration element is interesting because Southern California has a lot of oil deposits. Obviously, we haven't allowed exploration in a while, but the Chumash Indians who live where the fire happened, they used to use local petroleum to make pitch to seal their canoes and their homes, their large communal homes. It would still be a very difficult case to show that the fire in the wee hours of New Year's Day burned underground that whole time. After 24 fire trucks and 8 aircraft had worked to put this 8-acre blaze out. Now the LA Times is doing an investigation saying that the crews that responded to the fire on New Year's Day did not use thermal imaging to make sure the fire was out. They did go back to retrieve their hoses and to check to see the fire was out. That was on the 2nd. By the 3rd, the winds became very dangerous, and there were discussions about having fire engines ahead of time. But all available off-duty fire personnel were already working overtime before the first call came in about the Palisades fire at 10:30 a.m. on January 7th. Fire department was already dispatching all available aircraft to the Sunset Fire in Hollywood, causing a delay by the fire department's own admission in its recently released post-action report of 70 pages. It doesn't mention an underground fire, nor does it mention the hidden Buddha clearing where they say the fire started, where the ATF geolocated Jonathan Rinderknecht when the fire started in the wee hours of 2025. I think an important point to remember is that the vegetation in this area is on very uneven ground, very rugged, very rocky, and it's dense and thick. There's been a movement to save the chaparral because it's native and it prevents invasive species and it prevents soil erosion. Some of the seeds need fire in order to germinate because of their coating that has developed without mankind starting fires. The fire cycle of chaparral is 30 to 150 years. Okay, so now I'm going to share a beef I have had since I was even smaller than I am now, and that is little errors get introduced when there's breaking news so easily, But the culprit for calling this guy a Florida man is none other than the Department of Justice itself. So either you have a bureaucrat who's been doing those press releases forever and is so brain dead that that is just this ass backwards way of running a headline. But nobody really questions why we're calling him a Florida man. Okay, the New York Post reports that he has 3 siblings living in Florida. They seem older than him. At Thursday's arraignment, we learned that he has not been behaving himself and that his sister actually moved their 3 children out of the house for their safety. A brother and another sister also live nearby. He speaks fluent French and grew up in France. It has been reported. He lived in Pacific Palisades for a while, but apparently at the time of the fire was living in Hollywood. So having Florida right in the headline is a distraction, in my opinion. You could easily make a case to call him a Frenchman who was arrested for arson. Maybe there's something I don't know, but when you don't have all the details, generally you would just say, man arrested in Florida for starting Palisades fire. Maybe at some point in journalism, during the days of Molly Bly, they'd use the word drifter, but at this point, you don't really have to say, and when you don't know, don't. Or the DOJ, Pam Bondi, and Trump are trolling everyone by calling this guy a Florida man. Because we already know that Trump is trolling the Democrats at the top of federal agency site, blaming them for the shutdown. Go check it out. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe. See you soon.